Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to episode 2 of how to shoot better photos in the field. Now, these next 3 videos are going to be fairly short. I'm going to do each one of these principles on their own, and then I will do a much longer video on all 3 of them together and how they actually kind of interwork together. So there's 3 things that you need to understand when it comes to running your camera on manual. Those 3 things are shutter speed, f-stop, and ISO. Today, I'm just going to talk about shutter speed and what that actually is and when you're going to use that for particular shots. So shutter speed is literally just the length of time that the shutter is open. A lot of these mirrorless cameras now have an electronic shutter, but if you have an older DSLR or something that actually has a mirror flip up and allow light to hit on that sensor, the shutter speed is simply the amount of time that the sensor is open to light. And so if you are shooting something that's fast motion, if you're trying to freeze something that is moving quickly, you need to have a high shutter speed. So, these cameras, you can do a shutter speed from all the way from 30 seconds where the sensor's wide open all the way up to 1/8,000th of a second. So depending on how bright it is outside, depending on how fast your subject is moving, or what you're trying to do with the shot will dictate your shutter speed. So if you are trying to shoot birds that are flying, obviously birds are moving very fast, so you're going to have a high shutter speed. So if I've got good friends that do a lot of wildlife and bird photography, guys like Phil Conkey, Seth Owens, some of those guys do a lot of that shooting, and I know that their shutter speed has to be very high in order to freeze that motion. In other instances, if you're trying to do, say, a star photo where you're trying to gather as much light as possible, you're going to want to leave that shutter wide open. So for things like astrophotography, you're talking 10, 15, 20, 30-second exposures where you're leaving that shutter open for that length of time. And basically that sensor is gathering all the light it possibly can while that shutter is open. Now, when you talk about a shutter drag, basically you're almost photographing motion, where the subject is in focus, but everything else around it ends up being blurry. And so with that, you are using a slow shutter speed and you are dragging that shutter with your subject in order for the subject to be in focus and the rest of it to be blurry. So those can offer some very cool shots. Typically they take a lot of trial and error to get that right, but they're fun to do, and especially love the long, shutter speed shots, the night shots, all that low light stuff. But yeah, just wanted to, this video and the next 2, which I will cover f-stop or iris and your ISO, but wanted to quickly touch on what shutter speed is, what it does, and why you need it for different types of photography. So think if I'm shooting something that's moving really fast, you want a high shutter speed. Now, doing that, you're going to have to tweak your ISO and your f-stop, and that's why I will do a video combining all 3 of those things. If you're shooting something that's low light or you're trying to cause a little bit of that motion blur, you're going to use a slow shutter speed. Hope that helped you understand the one light principle when it comes to running a camera on manual. And we'll dive into the next 2 in the next few days here, so all 3 are up. And then again, hopefully by next week, I will have a video talking about all 3 and how to use them in conjunction with one another, depending on what type of shot you're trying to put together. So good luck out there in the field. Go mess around with your shutter speed, turn that up, turn that down, see how it affects your photos in the field or affects, the type of subject you're trying to shoot. So good luck, have a little fun with it. But that one is just a quick rundown on shutter speed.